I don't even know where to start. My hands are shaking as I type this because I never imagined my life would spiral into something out of a psychological thriller. But here I am, terrified, exhausted, and constantly looking over my shoulder. My name is Emily. I'm 30 years old, and I have an identical twin sister, Stacy. We were raised by our father after our mother tragically died during childbirth. It was always just the three of us, and despite our differences, Stacy and I were inseparable. But that all changed the day she asked me to do something I could never agree to. Stacy always wanted to be a mother. Even when we were kids, she would spend hours coming up with baby names, nursery themes, and planning imaginary weddings. I, on the other hand, never had that dream. I loved reading, traveling, and focusing on my career. I became a flight attendant and have been working toward publishing my writing. Stacy married Jeff 8 years ago, and for the past 5 years, she has been desperately trying to have a baby. IVF treatments, hormone therapies, diet changes, you name it, they tried it. She even suffered a miscarriage, and after that, her body could no longer carry a pregnancy. They began discussing other options, but Stacy was adamant that she wanted a baby with both her and Jeff's DNA. Adoption was out of the question. Then, 3 weeks ago, she came over to my apartment, and after some small talk and a few episodes of Modern Family, she finally blurted out the question she had been holding in. "Emily, I need you to be my surrogate." My heart stopped. I had always made it clear I never wanted kids. The idea of pregnancy had never appealed to me, and I told her that, but I still wanted to help her, so I offered to donate my eggs instead. That way, she could still have a biological child, just not one I carried. She was furious. She accused me of being spiteful and jealous, of wanting to see her suffer. She called me selfish, saying that carrying a baby was a simple task, and that if I loved her, I would do this one thing for her. Then she stormed out, knocking over a framed picture of the two of us as kids. I didn't hear from her again for days, except for passive-aggressive text messages, images of her vision boards, childhood diaries, and notes about how she had always planned for a big family. She kept telling me that I was pointlessly preventing her from starting a family and that I needed to see the bigger picture. But I did see the bigger picture, and that's why I said no. What I didn't know then was that my no would set off a chain of events that would push my life into absolute chaos. Days passed, and the silence from Stacy was deafening. My boyfriend, Mike, tried to be supportive, but he didn't want to influence my decision. He told me he would stand by me no matter what, but he wouldn't watch me be manipulated or mistreated. Then came the family dinner. When Mike and I arrived at our dad's house, Stacy was already there, along with Jeff. The moment we walked in, Jeff gave me a look that sent chills down my spine, cold, calculating, angry. We sat down for dinner, and almost immediately, the conversation turned to the surrogacy. My dad tried to mediate, but Jeff exploded. "Stop being so selfish, Emily. Your sister needs you. This is a family matter." I was stunned. I had expected anger from Stacy, but not from him. "I'm not carrying a child for you, Jeff," I snapped. He slammed his fist on the table. "You're pathetic. A waste of space. A selfish bee." That was it. My dad threw him out. After dinner, Stacy pulled me aside. She was crying, apologizing for Jeff's behavior, but still begging me to reconsider. That's when she told me something that made my blood run cold. At a recent family gathering, Jeff's parents had joked that Stacy was a murderer because of her miscarriage. And when she turned to Jeff for support, he said, "Well, they're not wrong," she whispered. "He hasn't been the same since we lost the baby. He says he won't ever love a child that isn't ours." I wanted to shake her. This wasn't love. This was manipulation, control, and abuse. But she couldn't see it. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. But then, the little things started adding up. It began with blocked calls at odd hours, silent when I picked up. Then the strange text messages, coming from unknown numbers. At first, they were vague. "We need to talk. You're making a mistake." But soon, they turned dark. "You don't get to say no to me. I always get what I want. I'll make you understand." Then I noticed the cars, a black SUV parked near my apartment one night, a red sedan, tailing me when I drove to work. Every time I tried to get a closer look, they would turn down a side street or disappear into traffic. The one time I drove toward the police station, the car following me vanished. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was overreacting, until the night my car was vandalized. After a football night at my dad's, I walked outside to find my passenger side window smashed and both front tires slashed. My heart pounded as I scanned the darkness, half expecting someone to lunge at me from the shadows. I didn't call the police. I didn't even tell my dad right away. Instead, I drove home, windows down, hands shaking, checking the rear view, mirror the whole way. That was my first mistake because the next day, Jeff showed up at a restaurant where I was having brunch with friends. I saw him the moment I stepped outside. He was leaning against his car, arms crossed, waiting. My stomach twisted. "Emily," he said, his voice smooth, like he wasn't the same man who had called me a selfish bijaks at the dinner table. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you," I said, backing toward the door. He stepped closer, too close. "I just want to apologize," he said, tilting his head like he was confused by my fear. "Everything got out of hand. It was all just a misunderstanding. I didn't believe him, not for a second. I have to go." I turned to walk back inside. That's when I felt it, his hand gripping my hair. "Don't you fucking walk away from me," he growled. I let out a sharp, panicked gasp. People turned. Someone yelled. A few men rushed over, pushing him away. Jeff bolted before the police arrived. I was terrified. That same week, he showed up at my workplace. Dressed in a button-down shirt, looking respectable, he walked into the airport and told security there was an emergency. His wife was in trouble and he needed to find her, except I wasn't his wife. When they asked him for ID, he got aggressive. Security had to escort him out. 2 nights later, my apartment was broken into. I wasn't there, thank God. I had been staying at my boyfriend's place, but when I went back to grab some clothes, I found the door slightly open. Inside, everything was destroyed. My couch cushions were slashed, my bookshelves knocked over, my kitchen cabinets emptied, dishes shattered on the floor. But the worst part? My bedroom. Jeff had taken everything personal, clothes, letters, photos, and thrown them. Across the room, my bed was torn apart. My favorite coffee mug, the one my mom gave me before she passed, was smashed into pieces on the floor, and on my mirror, scrawled in red marker, "It'll only get worse." I ran. I called my dad, sobbing. He came immediately, furious, telling me to go straight to my boyfriend's and stay there. That night, he installed cameras at my apartment, motion lights, and extra locks. But the truth was, I wasn't ever going back. That night, Stacy called me. I hesitated before answering. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, but when I picked up, I heard her crying. "Emily," she choked out. "I need to tell you something." My blood ran cold. "What is it?" "I've been following him," she whispered. "I've been watching. He's been watching you." I froze. "What do you mean?" "He's been outside your apartment. I saw him the night your car got vandalized. And I didn't know what to do." Tears burned in my eyes. Then she said something that broke me. "He told me he was doing this because he needed you to understand, that you were supposed to help us, and since you wouldn't, he had to make you." I felt like I couldn't breathe. That was the moment Stacy finally woke up. She left Jeff that night, packing a bag and going to my dad's house. The next day, Jeff broke into my apartment again. This time, the police set a trap. An undercover officer followed me around town, waiting, to see if Jeff would show up. It took 2 hours. I pulled into a parking lot. And there he was, waiting, watching. The cops arrested him on the spot. He screamed that I had ruined his life, that I had stolen Stacy from him, that I was supposed to be the one to fix everything. I've never felt such a mix of fear and relief. Stacy is staying with me now. She's filing for divorce, though I know Jeff won't make it easy. I haven't been back to my apartment since the break-in. I'm still scared, still checking my surroundings whenever I go outside, but there's one bright spot in all of this. Mike. When I told him I was thinking of getting my own place, thinking maybe I was taking over his space, he just looked at me and said, "You're not going anywhere. Marry me." And just like that, I went from being terrified and alone to engaged and safe. Jeff is still out there, awaiting trial. I don't know what will happen next, but for the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe again. To anyone reading this, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If someone is trying to control you, manipulate you, or force you into something you don't want, run. Family is not an excuse for abuse, and sometimes saying no is the most important thing you'll ever do. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you found it compelling, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones closest to you. Stay safe.